Mexican nationals living along the border behind deadly crimes in the Rio Grande Valley. Just recently, 2 were executed. Tonight, we hear how the Mexican government and legal counsel try to ensure that their clients or citizens are allowed justice. Our Marlene Rodriguez reports.
If Ruben had been prosecuted today, he never would have been convicted, let alone sentenced to death.
Ruben Ramirez Cárdenas, found guilty of abducting and raping his 16-year-old cousin from her family's apartment and fatally beating her. Robert Moreno Ramos, convicted of beating his wife and 2 children to death and burying them under his house. And Gustavo Tijerina Sandoval, sentenced for ambushing and killing an off-duty Border Patrol agent. 3 different men with 3 things in common. They are Mexican nationals who committed deadly crimes in the Rio Grande Valley and were sentenced to death in Texas. And they're not the only ones.
We have about 50 people on death row all over the U.S.,
which puts the neighboring countries at odds when a Mexican citizen is charged with capital murder.
And because of the advancement on human rights and I think the change in mood on the population, on the 2001, it was formally abolished from the Constitution.
Cárdenas' victim, Mayra Laguna, was snatched from her bedroom she shared with her younger sister in McAllen. In a confession to police, Cárdenas said he had sex with the teen and then punched her as she fought him after he unbound her arms to let her go. He said after he hit the teen in the neck, she began coughing up blood and having difficulty breathing. After trying unsuccessfully to revive her, he said he tied her up and rolled her down a canal bank. Ramos was convicted in the February 1992 slaying of Leticia Ramos, 42, daughter Abigail Ramos, 7, and Jonathan Ramos, 3 years old, were all beaten with a blunt object and died of skull fractures. Abigail's hands had been bound by tape and her mouth gagged prior to her death. Ramos married another woman 3 days after killing his family and moved her into the home where they were buried. Sandoval was tried this year. Witnesses, including the victim Javier Vega Jr.'s parents and children, who were present during the ambush, recall how Sandoval and his co-defendant drove by the family while they were fishing, then drove up to them and shouted at them to get down, then started shooting. Vega Jr. and his father, Javier Vega, were both shot, and Vega Jr. reportedly bled to death.
Even though the crimes that sometimes Mexican nationals are accused of are really grave, that they deserve a fair trial.
Under Vienna Convention, authorities must inform all detained foreigners immediately of their right to notify their counsel about their detention, along with their Miranda rights.
They have the right to remain silent, and everything they say can and will be used against them in the court of law.
On January 9, 2003, Mexico filed a lawsuit against the United States for violating the Vienna Convention when it detained, tried, and convicted 54 Mexican nationals and sentenced them to death row, including Cárdenas and Ramos.
I am convinced that we would not be standing here now if Texas had not violated its Vienna Convention obligations, preventing the Mexican consulate from assisting Ruben when he most needed its help.
Although Cárdenas and Ramos' sentence have already been carried out, the Mexican consulate is working on the dozens of other cases around the country to ensure that rights are not being violated.
In cases where a Mexican national has already been sentenced, the legal work continues in the courts, in the Superior Courts of Texas, and then some cases have gone to the Supreme Court.
In the Rio Grande Valley, Marlene Rodriguez, Local 23 News.
Another Mexican national, Ismael Hernandez Vallejo, Gustavo Sandoval's confidant, will be tried for the murder of Vega Jr. in January.